In the heart of a beautiful village nestled between fertile soils and a wide rivers, there lived a young man named Femi. His childhood had been one of quiet resilience, marked by his parents' disabilities but brightened by their love. Femi was known throughout the village for his good nature, kindness, and gentle spirit, a reflection of the home from which he came. Welcome to AfroTales TV, your home for rich, exciting, and inspiring stories from around the world. Today's story will touch your heart and keep you hooked till the very end. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our amazing stories. His father, Babatunde, had been born into a family of farmers, working the rich, red soil like generations before him. Though he was deaf and mute, Babatunde's hands spoke with the earth, and his actions communicated the depth of his heart. His calm, hard-working nature earned him respect in the village. Many marveled at how he navigated the world of silence, as though he could hear and speak through the rhythm of the fields and the whispers of the wind. Femi's mother, Morenike, was equally extraordinary. Blind since birth, she had a radiant inner light that seemed to shine through her sightless eyes. She was known for her beaded crafts, exquisite works of art that adorned the necks, wrists, and ankles of many in the village. Her fingers danced along the beads as if guided by an unseen force, creating designs so intricate and beautiful that it was hard to believe they had come from someone who had never seen the world's colors. It was the quiet admiration of Morenike's beauty and character that first drew Babatunde's attention to her, long before the idea of marriage was mentioned. He would watch her from a distance when he visited the market, captivated by her smile, always kind and serene, as she felt her way through the world. There was something ethereal about the way she moved, as if she saw more than others with her inner sight. Yet Babatunde had never dared approach her. How could a man who could not speak or hear connect with a woman who could not see? The thought filled him with doubt. But as fate would have it, it was not Babatunde who initiated their union. His elder brother, a man practical in mind but harsh in spirit, came to him one day with news. The family had decided it was time for Babatunde to marry, and they had found him a suitable bride, Morenike, the blind woman who lived alone at the edge of the village. The arrangement was less about love and more about ridding both families of responsibility. No longer would they have to care for Babatunde, the mute, or Morenike, the blind. Together, they would become each other's burden. Though his brother's words were cold, Babatunde did not resist. He did not feel shame or bitterness, for in his heart there was only a quiet joy. The thought of being bound to Morenike, the woman whose strength and grace had long filled him with silent admiration, felt like a gift. He would be her eyes, and perhaps she could help him communicate in ways he had never imagined. Morenike, too, had accepted the arrangement with quiet dignity. She had always believed in the goodness of people, and though she had never met Babatunde closely, she had heard stories of his kindness. Despite his silence, people spoke of his actions, his generosity, and his gentle nature. When the marriage was proposed to her, she smiled that same serene smile she was known for. The wedding was a simple affair, with the village gathered under the shade of an ancient iroko tree. Babatunde's hands had gently guided Morenike through the ceremony, and though they did not exchange words, the bond between them was evident to all who witnessed it. To them, their union was not one of convenience, but of mutual respect and understanding. Over time, they learned to navigate their world together, Babatunde guiding Morenike with his strong, gentle hands, and Morenike teaching him how to see the beauty in the world that was beyond sight or sound. As Femi grew, he learned from his parents that love did not need words or sight to flourish. It thrived in the quiet acts of kindness, in the unspoken understanding that passed between two people. His mother's laughter, like the tinkling of her beads, filled their home, while his father's steady presence was like the deep roots of a tree, grounding them all. The village, too, came to admire the couple. They were a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even the greatest challenges could be overcome with patience and love. And though Femi's family was different from most, It was rich in ways that others could only envy. It had been a quiet evening when Moreniki first felt the flutter in her belly, like the soft wings of a butterfly. She paused in her work, her fingers stilling on the string of beads that rested on her lap. For a moment, she sat completely still, feeling the small but unmistakable signs of life within her. A smile spread across her face. She knew she needed to tell Babatunde. Placing her hands in front of her to feel the familiar surroundings, Moreniki stood up and made her way to the garden, where Babatunde was working. Her movements were sure, the pathways memorized over the months of walking them without sight. The sound of her footsteps on the soil let Babatunde know she was coming. He came to her immediately, concern etched on his face as he stood before her, taking her hands in his. Without words, she guided his hand to her stomach, her smile growing wider as she felt his fingers tremble. Babatunde understood in that moment. They were going to have a child. Joy surged through him, so powerful that it momentarily took his breath away. He had always imagined what it would be like to be a father, to raise a child alongside Moreniki. But just as quickly, that joy was shadowed by a silent fear, one that crept into the corners of his heart like an unwelcome guest. What if the child inherited their disabilities? What kind of life would their child have in a world that often viewed people like them with pity or worse, disdain? Morenike sensed the change in Babatunde's mood, as if she could read his thoughts. She squeezed his hand gently, pulling him back from his worries. "This child," she whispered, her voice soft but strong, "will be loved no matter what. We will teach him all we know, how to live, how to love, how to see the world even when eyes cannot, and how to speak even in silence." She reached up and touched his face, guiding his fingers to her lips once more. Babatunde looked into her eyes and focused on her mouth, waiting for her to speak again. "This child," she whispered, speaking slowly so that he could read her lips, "will be loved no matter what. We will teach him everything we have learned." Her words, though simple, carried the strength of her conviction. Babatunde nodded slowly, reassured by her calm certainty. She had always been the light in his darkness, her strength a constant source of comfort. They had faced many challenges together, and now they would face this one too. He placed both hands on her belly, his face breaking into a wide, silent smile. Their child would be a gift, not a burden, no matter what. As the weeks passed and Moreniki's belly swelled with life, the news of her pregnancy spread through the village like wildfire. Some were shocked, others were curious. After all, it wasn't every day that a blind woman and a mute man brought a child into the world. Whispers began to fill the air, weaving through the market and the fields as people speculated about the child's fate. "I heard the child might be born blind or deaf," one woman murmured to her neighbor as they pounded yam together. "Imagine the burden they will face," another voice chimed in. "What kind of life will that child have? They can hardly communicate themselves." Yet, amidst the mockery and doubt, there were voices of encouragement as well. An old woman, known for her wisdom, shook her head at the gossipers. "You underestimate God," she said firmly. "Babatunde and Moreniki are stronger than you know. And their child, whatever challenges he may face, will be no different. Mark my words, he will grow into someone we will all be proud of." "I wonder if the child will be like them," one villager said to another, "born with the same afflictions. Imagine the difficulties they will face. How will they communicate with the child?" another voice added, with more than a hint of judgment. But a few continued to speak kindly. "Babatunde and Moreniki are stronger than you think," one elder woman said firmly. "Their child will be just as strong, mark my words." Despite the mixed reactions, the gossip weighed on them. Babatunde could see the way people looked at Moreniki in the village, and though he could not hear the comments, he knew from the expressions on their faces that many were doubtful. He worked harder in the fields, pouring his silent frustrations into the soil. Moreniki, while unable to see the stares, could feel the shift in people's voices when they spoke to her, offering unsolicited advice or poorly veiled pity. Yet, through it all, Morenike and Babatunde remained resolute. They spoke to each other without words, their understanding deepened by months of shared life. At night, they sat together by the fire, Morenike resting her hand on her belly, while Babatunde sat beside her, his head tilted slightly, always reading the expressions on her face. "We will love this child," Morenike would say to him slowly, her words forming on her lips, clear enough for him to read. "And this child will teach us more than we could ever teach him." The months passed, and soon the time came for Morenike to give birth. On a warm evening, as the sky blazed with the colors of sunset, the time came as Morenike's labor began. Babatunde stayed by her side, watching her face intently, reading her needs without the need for sound. Morenike's labor was long and difficult, the pain of childbirth overwhelming her senses. Babatunde remained close, his eyes never leaving her face. He could not hear her cries, but he could feel the tremors of her body, the tension in her hands as she gripped his. He pressed her hand to his lips, silently reminding her that he was with her, that they were in this together. Morenike, though exhausted, found comfort in his presence. She could not see him, but she felt his strength, steady and unwavering. The midwife, who had been preparing for the birth, communicated with Babatunde through gestures they had worked out ahead of time. Morenike, though blind and in pain, focused on the presence of both Babatunde and the midwife, trusting them completely. The hours passed slowly, with Babatunde never leaving her side. He could not hear her cries, but he saw the tension in her body and the exhaustion on her face. Finally, as the night deepened, the baby was born. The midwife held up the child, a small bundle of life wriggling in her arms. Babatunde's eyes were fixed on the midwife as he waited for her to turn to him. She smiled softly as she handed the baby to Morenike. "The boy is strong," she said, speaking clearly so Babatunde could read her lips. "He is healthy." Morenike's shoulders sagged in relief, her hand flying to her mouth as tears streamed down her face. Babatunde, too, let out a long breath, his chest heaving with silent sobs of gratitude. Babatunde placed his hand on the baby's head, his expression one of pure relief and joy. Morenike held the baby close, her fingers tracing the delicate features of his face as tears filled her sightless eyes. Babatunde watched them both, his heart swelling with love and gratitude. They had brought life into the world, and despite the challenges, their child would know nothing but love. Here's the next chapter, focusing on Femi's growing years, his challenges, and how he rose above them with the love and guidance of his parents. Femi grew up under the watchful eyes and caring hands of his parents. From an early age, he understood that his family was different. His mother's blindness and his father's inability to speak or hear were facts of life, things he quickly learned to navigate as easily as he navigated the paths between the village and their home. But what Femi couldn't ignore were the words of others, the whispers, the stares, and the cruel taunts from the village children. At first, Femi was too young to understand the mocking laughter that followed him when he ran through the village. He didn't know why the other children avoided him, or why they mimicked the silent gestures his father used to communicate. But as he grew older, the cruelty became more apparent. "Look at him," they would jeer, "the son of the blind and the mute. He probably can't speak properly either. He's going to be just like them, useless." The words cut deep, sharper than any blade, and Femi would run home, his small hands clenched into fists, tears streaming down his face. At first, he tried to hide the pain from his parents. How could he tell them about the mocking when his father couldn't hear it, and his mother couldn't see the children pointing and laughing? But Femi soon realized he didn't need to say anything. His parents always knew when something was wrong. One evening, after a particularly hard day, Femi sat by the fire, refusing to speak. His father, Babatunde, noticed the boy's clenched jaw and downcast eyes. Babatunde knelt in front of his son, his hands gentle as they touched Femi's shoulders. Morenike, sensing the tension, joined them, sitting quietly beside her son. Without words, Babatunde asked the question. What happened? Femi, still holding back tears, turned to face his father. He didn't need to say much. Babatunde, reading the sadness in his son's eyes and the tightness in his posture, understood. Morenike, though blind, could sense the heaviness in the air. She placed her hand on Femi's cheek, her voice soft but firm. Femi, the world will not always be kind, she said, speaking slowly so that Babatunde could read her lips as well. But what matters most is how we see ourselves. You are strong, you are loved, and no matter what others say, you must never forget that. Babatunde nodded, placing his hand over his heart, and then gently tapping Femi's chest, a gesture that meant, "We are with you, always." Their reassurance gave Femi a sense of peace, a sense of belonging that the outside world could not take away. His parents' love was his anchor, and though the village children's taunts still hurt, they no longer had the power to shake him. As Femi grew, so did his determination. He watched his parents closely, marveling at the way they navigated the world despite their challenges. Babatunde's hands spoke volumes, his gestures as clear as words to those who knew him well. Morenike's smile and laughter filled their home with warmth, even though her eyes could not see the light. They were proud of him, and in return, Femi vowed to make them prouder still. He threw himself into his studies, determined to learn everything he could. In school, while the other children played and laughed, Femi focused on his lessons. He wanted to be the best, not just for himself, but for his parents. He knew that as he grew older, they would rely on him more. And though he was still young, Femi had already decided that he would be their voice and their guide in the world. At home, Femi became the bridge between his mother and father. Morenike, though blind, could feel the unspoken connection between Femi and Babatunde, how they communicated through subtle gestures and movements. Femi had inherited his father's skill for reading lips, and he used this ability to translate his mother's words into gestures for Babatunde. It was an unspoken bond, an intuitive dance that became second nature to the boy. When Morenike wanted to tell Babatunde something, she would speak softly, knowing Femi was close by to read her lips. Femi would then turn to his father and use the hand signals Babatunde had taught him over the years. In this way, the family communicated seamlessly, with Femi acting as the thread that tied them all together. One evening, as they sat around the fire, Femi's heart swelled with pride as he watched his parents smile at each other. He had helped them build something beautiful, a home where love and understanding transcended any limitations the world might impose. But Femi's determination extended beyond the walls of their home. He excelled in school, earning the admiration of his teachers and the grudging respect of the village children who once taunted him. Slowly, the whispers of mockery began to fade, replaced by murmurs of admiration. "Femi is a hard worker," they would say. "He's not like we thought. He's going to be something great." Despite the shift in opinion, Femi remained humble. His motivation was not to prove the village wrong, but to ensure that his parents never had to face the ridicule that had once plagued his childhood. He wanted to stand tall for them, to be the person who could bridge the gap between them and the rest of the world. Over the years, Femi became more than just a son to his parents. He became their eyes and ears, their voice in a world that was often too loud and too distant for them. He spoke for his mother when others didn't have the patience to explain things slowly. He read the lips of the village elders for his father during important meetings. And through it all, Femi felt his parents' pride like a steady flame, warming his heart on the darkest days. One day, as Femi helped his father in the fields, Babatunde stopped for a moment, wiping the sweat from his brow. He turned to Femi and signed, "You are strong. You have become the man I always hoped you would be." Femi smiled, his chest swelling with pride. His father didn't need to say more. The bond they shared was deeper than words, more profound than any conversation could ever be. Later that evening, as the family sat together under the stars, Morenike reached out and placed her hand on Femi's shoulder. Her fingers traced his face, as if seeing him for the first time. "You are everything we dreamed you would be," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "You are our greatest gift." Femi didn't reply. He didn't need to. His heart was full, and in that moment, he knew that no matter what challenges the future held, he would face them with the same quiet strength that his parents had taught him. The day the letter arrived was a day Femi would never forget. It was early morning, and the sun had just begun to peek over the horizon, bathing the village in a golden glow. Femi was sitting with his parents by the fire, helping his mother string beads while Babatunde quietly mended a basket. The sound of footsteps approaching the house broke the stillness, and Femi looked up to see the village messenger carrying a large envelope in his hand. The messenger handed the letter to Femi with a smile and a nod, as if he already knew what the contents held. Femi took the envelope in his trembling hands when he saw the logo on it, his heart pounding. His parents, sensing the significance of the moment, paused in their work. Babatunde moved closer, while Moreniki, unable to see what was actually happening, felt the tension in the air. Femi carefully opened the envelope, pulling out the letter inside. His eyes scanned the words, and as he read, his heart skipped a beat. He had been accepted into a prestigious university, one of the finest institutions in the country. And not only that, he had been awarded a scholarship that would cover his tuition, housing, and even his meals. For a moment, Femi was speechless. He had worked so hard for this moment, pouring all his energy into his studies, dreaming of a future that would allow him to help his parents in ways they couldn't imagine. But now that it was here, the reality of it felt overwhelming. Moreniki, unable to wait any longer, reached for Femi's hand. "What does it say?" she asked softly, her voice filled with anticipation. Femi smiled, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been accepted. They want me to attend the university, and I've been given a scholarship." Moreniki gasped, her face breaking into a wide smile as she pulled Femi into a tight embrace. Babatunde, who had been watching Femi closely, understood what had just been said. He gripped his son's shoulders, his face full of pride, his silent joy filling the space between them. They were proud, prouder than words could express. Their son, who had faced so much adversity, had achieved something they had only dreamed of. He was going to go far, farther than they had ever imagined. But as the initial joy settled, a new fear crept into Femi's heart. The university was far, far beyond the village, in another state, where life was fast-paced and unfamiliar. He had never left his village before. The thought of being away from his parents, who relied on him so much, weighed heavily on his mind. That night, as they sat by the fire, Femi shared his fears with his parents. "How can I leave you both here alone?" he said, his voice quiet. "What if something happens, and I'm not here to help? What if I don't know how to manage on my own in a place so different from here?" Moreniki, hearing the worry in her son's voice, reached for him. She took his hand in hers and squeezed it gently. "Femi," she began slowly, "you have always been strong. You have always found a way to overcome every challenge. This is no different. Just as you have been our strength, you must trust that we will be okay. We have lived our lives together for many years before you came, and we will continue to manage. This is your time to fly." Babatunde nodded in agreement, his hand resting on Femi's shoulder. He gestured with his free hand, signing to his son, "You must go. We will be fine. You have earned this opportunity. Don't let fear hold you back." Femi felt a lump in his throat. His parents' encouragement meant everything to him, but the idea of leaving them behind still frightened him. Yet, deep down, he knew they were right. This was a chance he couldn't let slip away. The weeks leading up to Femi's departure were filled with preparations. The villagers, many of whom had watched Femi grow up, came to congratulate him and offer their well wishes. Some brought gifts, simple tokens like food or handmade items, while others offered advice about the world beyond the village. Femi smiled and thanked them, but inside, the nerves grew stronger with each passing day. Finally, The day arrived. Femi stood at the edge of the village, his small bag packed with all the essentials for his journey. His parents stood beside him, their faces full of pride. Morenike, who could not see her son's departing figure, held his hands tightly, her smile bittersweet. Babatunde's grip on his son's shoulder was firm, a silent message that Femi would carry with him wherever he went. "You will be great," Morenike said, her voice soft. "We know it." Femi nodded, trying to hold back his tears. He hugged his parents tightly, promising to write to them as often as he could, before turning to begin his journey.